When I was young, the harbour was covered with salt marsh. All around the margins of the harbour was huge areas of salt marsh, which mostly have died away now.
What you see now is actually a green environment where all the mud flats are completely covered in seaweed. That's affecting the food source of the native birds. It's also smothering lots of the seagrasses and other protected species.
So the general understanding is that in brackish water and places like estuaries, that nitrate is the limiting factor. So if you introduce nitrate into that environment, that really gets the plants growing and proliferating too much. Whereas in freshwater and rivers, it tends to be phosphorus which is the limiting factor. So the general understanding is that phosphorus is more important in a freshwater situation. Nitrate becomes more important in a saline or brackish situation, such as Poole Harbour.
With the stuff coming down the rivers, and it's not only nitrates and phosphates, it's occasionally we get combined sewage overflows, quite a lot, more than we should, that's what we think. But it really needs to be addressed. And nobody wants to fish, swim, earn a living in a dirty place, in a sewer place. Last year, when we had a lot of sun, it grew like fury.
So seaweed, what they're good at is taking up nutrients very quickly because they're very simple organisms. These ulva is the name for the seaweed species we see here. It's only 2 cells thick, so it doesn't have to do a lot to absorb the nutrients which are in the water.
So they form from spores, single cell, reproductive organisms, and then they attach and they grow, and they get so big that they float. They start floating, right? And then they form, and this happens, millions and millions of these organisms, and then they form a mat.
The great big rafts of it float about the harbour, which, when you're steaming your boat in the harbour, gets sucked into the waterways of the engines, so you're constantly cleaning strainers on the boats. When the weed comes, it smothers everything. When it dies, takes the oxygen out, turns the mud black and kills everything in it, so there's nothing for anybody.
So Poole Harbour is an SPA, or a Special Protected Area, and it was given that status in the late 90s due to the sheer volume of rare and protected bird species that overwinter here. So birds are a very key indicator species and do reveal to us quite a lot about climate change and habitat health. What we see with these decreases in certain numbers of species is directly linked to algal mats.
Standing here by the River Froome, it's beautiful. This flows into the harbour. And this is designated as a treble SI, this and the harbour, which stands for a site of special scientific interest. I totally disagree with that. I think treble SI should stand for a site of special scientific importance, because this is so important. When you look at the wildlife, the invertebrates, the travelling birds that come here to visit us, it is so important, which is why we must take it seriously to look after this.
About 12% of the nitrate that's going into Poole Harbour is coming from water recycling centres, our sewage treatment works. And so that clearly is our responsibility. About 66% comes from agriculture. We reckon probably about 17% comes from the sea, comes into the harbour from the sea, and the other might just be atmospheric effects.
The key sectors that we're working with who have a role and responsibility are the water companies, because clearly they're discharging effluent from wastewater treatment works. They're also abstracting water and needing to provide good, clean drinking water to people who live in the catchment and elsewhere. The agricultural sector are also key because they're producing food for us and using nutrients, and any excess nutrients that aren't taken up by the crops will sort of flow into the soil and infiltrate through and will eventually find themselves in the rivers and actually in the harbour. So they're a key player. Also local authorities, because they're responsible for planning permissions. Therefore, as part of that, people apply for planning permission for building houses, which brings more people, more nutrients effectively, more toilets being flushed in the catchment. So we published the recommendations in 2021 and our overall objective is to make sure that by 2030 the activities of all sectors, all people who live in there, isn't going to cause harm in the future.
We can work with this at every level, from community, local authority, up to government, which is why I say the most important thing at present is the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and how sewage treatment works being upgraded is so important.
So we work really closely with all those parties, and the recommendations from the consent order, the water quality targets, are binding to them all, effectively.
So the consent order gives all the stakeholders in Poole Harbour specific responsibilities, and we are one of those. So specifically, we need to reduce the amount of nitrates going into Poole Harbour. So we're going to have to build additional treatment at Poole Water Recycling Centre for both nitrate and phosphorus. So that's effectively halving the amount of nitrate concentration going into the harbour and reducing down phosphorus to the technically achievable limits. We do think there are other solutions and nature-based solutions. We're looking for them. We're really keen to kind of engage with all of the stakeholders in the catchments to try and understand that better. We don't have all the ideas, so we're sure that there are people out there who've got really good ideas about how to work with us and how we could work with them.
We are wanting to use this land to gather as much data as we can to help inform as many people as we can about what benefits a natural process system can bring for wildlife, for access, for nutrient management, for carbon sequestration, for flood alleviation, for all of these kind of these linked benefits. At Wild Woodbury, that means renaturalising as best as we can the hydrology, so allowing the water to have control over where it goes. By slowing it down already, I mean it's April, but there's a lot of algae growing here. That algae would otherwise be in Poole Harbour. Normally this water doesn't have time, it doesn't slow down enough to have this algal growth in these ditches. That will have just shot straight down to Poole Harbour, where it does suddenly slow down and have time, have those massive algal growths which are then causing such issues for wildlife and livelihoods down in the harbour. So for me this is a good sign here. It means this is working from a nutrient point of view.
So for agriculture, we're also looking for farmers actually to start taking action from this year, to start looking at their nutrient application and actually start to calculate and quantify for the first time how much nutrient they might be losing each year. A few farmers wanted to take ownership for the issue. They recognised there was a problem, and they proposed to set up a nutrient trading scheme.
The group of farmers that set up the Poole Harbour Agricultural Group, one of the fundamental drivers for them was about retaining Dorset farming, so retaining farming within the Poole Harbour catchment. So this isn't about necessarily reducing food production. This is all about increasing the efficiency of nitrogen on farm, so that businesses can retain their food production sort of status, but they also improve the habitat, particularly the waterways that reach down to Poole Harbour.
From a farmer's perspective, what I'd like to communicate is that as farmers, our day job is to produce healthy, nutritious, sustainable food for the general public. But the other part of our business is that we have to look after the environment. We care deeply about the land that we farm, and we're really trying hard to enhance the area that we live in, that we work in, and we're trying to look after the biodiversity that's local to our farms. So we're trying really hard. Yes, there's more we can do, but it's a journey and we're really committed to that.
The Poole Nutrient Management Scheme is a really innovative way that we can achieve sort of both objectives. The objectives for farmers to continue to produce food in the most efficient, sustainable way, but also deliver the water quality objectives.
Because of the size of the catchment and also its geology, we have got an incredibly complex relationship with leaching and the harbour, and that really is around time. So at one end of the harbour it can take 20 or 30 years for the nitrate to actually leach and reach the harbour itself.
Nitrate leached to ground will move about a metre a year until it hits the water table, and then it will reach rivers much more quickly. So it does take months, years and decades for nitrate to actually pass through from the field through to the harbour.
We've been told a few years ago that it could take up to 40 years for it to wash through the soil. So, but you know, why not? You know, when you plant a tree, you're not going to see it when it's properly grown. So why not ease back if possible and get the benefits when we're no longer here? But we've got to leave stuff for the future generations. You want it better. In the ideal world, you leave it better than when you found it.
The aim is that people's activities in the catchment today don't cause harm tomorrow. So we need to make sure that by 2030, no activities from agriculture, from water companies, development will cause harm in the future. But we recognise it's actually going to take years and decades for actually the improvements that result from that to be seen in the harbour.